प्रभु तव मूर्ति विनोदकारी पलपन विसरे नहीं जो विसारी जुगल चरण सोल चिन्ह जेह नजर समीपे रहो अमारी एह नजर समीपे रहो अमारी एह। स्वामीनारायण भगवाननी जय, ठाकुरजी महाराजनी जय, घनश्याम महाराजनी जय, सद्गुरुदेवनी जय। Supreme Almighty, our utmost dear Sadguru Shri Muktanand Swami Sevit Shri Thakurji Maharaj, our divine Muktanandiya Parampara, the pathmaker to our liberation, our dear Puja Guruji, and all of you, Santo and Bhakto, Jai Swaminarayan. Today's topic I chose was from a Utsav that was done 6 months ago on transparency, but it was done in Gujarati. But for all of those viewers who missed it in that way, we can also discuss and clarify a little bit in the language of English. Transparency, clarity in our life. Transparency is one of the biggest things that a devotee of Bhagwan Swaminarayan needs in his life in order to remain happy and in order to also keep others happy around him. So without further ado, let's dive into it. First and foremost, let's check what transparency is. What is transparency? Well, first and foremost, being open with others. First, I'm going to read the points and then we can dissect. Providing open feedback, being truthful, not hiding relevant information, being honest, creating shared understanding, and communicating clearly. Transparency is something that is only and can only be done if there is some kind of atmiyata or some kind of bhav or emotion towards the opposite person. For example, in the world, transparency can be used in a marriage life, which is the most important factor of any marriage. Marriage is based on trust, because you don't know the opposite person until you meet them. For 25 years, you've never known them, and then you meet them and you're going to decide to spend the rest of your life with that person. But if there is not this very factor, then it would be a very hard relationship and very difficult for that person to cope with in the future for their life. In the same way, in religious perspective, whoever we're living with or whoever we have a relationship with, it doesn't really certainly pertain to if that person is with you or not, but more so, it has to do with having a relationship with that person. May it be over the phone. There's many devotees that live far away, may it be Florida, Georgia, Canada, UK. There's also santos, our santos also live in India. But as a factor of transparency, even if they're not physically living with you, even if you have a relationship with them, this factor is definitely noted for, and probably one of the most vital facts in order for that relationship to grow better. So being open with others, that's a very straightforward point. Open meaning however you're feeling, providing open feedback. One thing about that is providing open feedback, it's good to have as long as one's you can say speech is very, very, you can say vivek or very respected. The person has respect for the opposite person and then he shares feedback. Nonetheless, that person also, vice versa, has respect, and then shares feedback, that would be a very ideal, transparent situation. Being truthful, obviously, not hiding relevant information. Whatever needs to be said is said on the table, being honest, creating a shared understanding. Very important. In our Muktanand Parampara, understanding is something that is our foundation. And as for my perspective, understanding is not something where one has a lot of knowledge of a lot of scriptures, but understanding is something which is something that one needs on the perspective of relating to who and how that person is. Understanding is something that is not about knowledge itself. Understanding is more about practically experiencing. Muktanand Swami's life, you can say, is full of understanding. How so? Yes, he was a Mahan Pandit. Of course, we can say that without a doubt. He wrote numerous scriptures. He won a lot of debates in Vadodara, for sure. But more so, his practical life proved that he was like that. His practical life saying that, for example, when he was traveling in Vicharan and he got hit with the potu by that dosi, that grandmother, his reaction was beneficial for the other person. He did not react any way other than that. Nonetheless, when there was that bhava that tied up Muktanand Swami and Brahmanand Swami and wanted to cut their nose off, he had the understanding of Bhagwan's Kartapanu. Understanding in practical situations is very open. But the most factor that touched me about Muktanand Swami's life is his dasatva. And his dasatva is something that is seen and that is running through his veins and blood throughout his each and every kriya or his action. Now, dasatva is something that is very difficult to obtain. That word is just one word, but that word takes one's whole life to develop. That's the only way one can become an Anadi Mukta. Practically seeing today, Pujya Mohan Swami, Pujya Vignan Swarup Swami, his birthday was celebrated today in Vadodara, and many santos talked about his great qualities. And each and every santo, and especially Pujya Guruji, and even our Pujya Surat Ulab Swami and Pujya Niskan Ulab Swami sent their blessings or their gungan or their rajipo, you can say, in the form of a video there, and it was played. And there, all the santos that I marked was Swami's dasatva, Swami's nirmanipanu, Swami's way of staying humble and remaining humble. Now, being the chairman of the whole organization, that's a lot of power politically. Nonetheless, having each and every sadgun, according to Pujya Guruji's video, yet staying humble on the spiritual side is true dasatva. And it's a factor that is played in transparency very much. But sometimes, one's swabhav gets to oneself, and there's sometimes an indirect, not throw, but an insult, a hurtful feeling. That's why transparency is something that needs to be done in day-to-day life, staying open and communicating clearly. Nonetheless, transparency. Being transparent takes a lot of courage. And that is because one has to kind of let go of oneself there. One has to let go of one's existence there. One has to bow down there. One has to let go of one's choice there. One has to take a lot of thought and do that very thing. Now, saying so, if one person is ready to be transparent, maybe the other person is not. One person may feel that it is very hard. If I say something, that person might become hurt more than he's supposed to. again, hand in hand. If you think about it, this can be used in your parents and son-daughter situation, marriage situations especially, that all these things play a factor. Wherever there is a relationship, there's going to be this kind of quality needed in order for that to run smoothly. Not everyone can show their true self or their true motives because of fear. Now, with that said, yes, that is hard, and it's not about completely showing one's true self. It's about showing oneself according to the level of relationship one has with the opposite person. I would be completely transparent with Pujya Guruji because as a Shishya, as a disciple, that's my obligation. According to Vachanamrut Gurudeva, 1st chapter 58. 100% there, no matter what. But according to whichever person you're living with, may it be a santo, may it be a bhakto, or may it be in the worldly life, that's how much percentile you have to weigh and then be transparent. So it's not about 100% everywhere. That's very important to also acknowledge. Fear of being rejected. Yes, of course, everyone can and will always be afraid that what will this person think, or not everyone has the mentality of a bhakta. But definitely, a bhakta has a mentality of a bhakta. A bhakta is willing to forget and forgive and move on forward with everything in any situation. But there's always that factor that is the opposite person also willing to do so? Fear of being judged. Now, judgment is something that is of the world, but for that person to be judged, if it's not a close relationship, yeah, judgment might be made. But if there is a close relationship, then that kind of nullifies this factor. Fear of being reliable and trustable. As again I said, trust is the most important factor, and something that, trust is something that is needed in transparency, but there's nothing that can be done without being open. All problems are solved by being open. Transparency is important. Let's take a look at these points. Transparency advances reliable relationships. Being open makes you more approachable, brings you closer, it creates positive environment. 100% that's true. Being open, and something that's gonna be always there is the more you get closer with someone, the more you are able to approach him, the more you're able to talk to him. But sometimes what happens is that opposite person might have some kind of some kind of other feeling that is not even in the opposite person, not even one bit. But that person may be portrayed that way as kind of like a false image. And due to that, but what I say is the biggest and best way for a person, if you want to judge someone, is to get a judgment from an ekantik Sadpurush. If you get a judgment for another person from an ekantik Sadpurush, then there is no going wrong. If you try to judge from one's own mind, there's always something that's going to go wrong. The Satpurush has a 360 camera around that person. He knows exactly how that person is. And even if suppose you cannot approach a Satpurush and ask about that person, even from previous historic prasangs where that Satpurush has said something about that person, even from that factor, you would be able to tell that that person is like this. That's for spiritual life. In the same way, for worldly life, it's very important that you get an elder's perspective and then judge someone. Because even in your life as householders, if you make the mistake of judging someone wrong, then that relationship will be destroyed. Relationships are destroyed because of assumptions or assuming that this person is like this. But in reality, if you get people's perspective, those who know that person for a long period of time, have experience with that person, and then ask and then rely, you're definitely going to head in the positive direction for sure. So that's why it's very important to get that factor down. Nonetheless, it creates positive environment. When we are transparent with the people who we live with, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20, automatically our behavior is positive. We're more happier. We're more positive. We are more wanting to do things, enthusiasm. That's always going and going. So this is definitely, may this word be in English. Bhagwan Swaminarayan covers this factor for sure in the Vachanamrut that we're going to take a look in the future slide. People trust you more. Yes, definitely. You need to earn trust. You can't expect to be trusted right away. Trust is something that is spirituality and worldly life's most important factor. For example, in spirituality, if we have a relationship with our Ekantik Satpurush and he says something for us and we put trust in his words, then that trust is automatically going to give us Atyantik Kalyan. That's how big of a factor this trust is, this one alone factor. Puja Guruji says this prasang about this Shiva Baba in the village of Khandli. And there is this other great sant that he was in contact with, and he believed him to be his guru. Now Shiva Baba had a very bad habit of smoking, okay? And his whole life he smoked tobacco. And what happened is many santos came and told him, do not smoke, and he only said one thing: my guru has told me that I will come and take you to Akshardham at the end of your life. Will you be able to stop me? And he would keep smoking. But the thing is, the point to get from this is not to keep a bad habit and put false trust in a Satpurush and just rely on that. No. The factor to look at is that Shiva Bhai had blind faith in his Sadguru, and due to that, even these kinds of habits were not obstacles for him in the path of attaining ultimate liberation. That's how big of a factor trust is. According to Puja Guruji's Katha, trust is blind. Trust is something where if I told you that behind this wall there is the Kohinoor diamond. The Kohinoor diamond is currently in England in the Queen's crown. But suppose I said that the Kohinoor diamond is behind this wall, and you trust my words, even if you have that knowledge that where it is exactly, where it's placed, in what crown it is, you know everything about that diamond. You know how priceless it is, you know it's about 350 carats, you know everything. Yet, you do not think about that. You lock your mind and you say, yes, there is a Kohinoor diamond behind that wall. Even if there wasn't, putting trust in that Purush and moving forward automatically gets you Atyatmik Kalyan. That's how great of a factor trust is. Just like how in spirituality, trust is also important in day-to-day relationship lives with people who you live with. So you have to earn trust. You can't just expect it right away. So it's a time process. It takes a long time. But after you trust someone, automatically you know that this person is like this and he would never do anything like this. It's just a given factor. Transparency is important. The importance of transparency. Transparency leads to better decisions and solutions, improves ability to solve problems and make better decisions. Being open and honest is approachable. So decisions and solutions are made when one becomes transparent. The process is easier. If you want to make a big decision in your life, in your worldly life, with your marriage life, let's say, for example. Now, you want to buy a big house, and your wife says, let's buy a big house. And you know it's not in your price range. But if you're transparent, it's a big decision to buy a house in the householder life. It's like one of the big things that they do, like after marriage and stuff like that. But if your wife does not know your financial capability or your bank account assets because you're not transparent or open, that can lead to a lot of miscommunication and problems in your relationship if you're not clear. But if you know and you tell your partner that we have this much in the bank and we can take this loan, and if we do this, then we can do this, so this house is not in our range, then that person would also relate to you because you are open and transparent with them. So making decisions like this as householders, definitely transparency is a very big thing. Makes life easier. Yep. Being open and honest reduces the risk of misinterpretations and confusions. Naturally earn trust and respect. Making life easier is a very good thing to have. But in the spiritual life or the worldly life, there's always going to be ups and downs. But not to get fazed by those ups and downs, not to become disturbed by the ups and downs, is the way of a bhakt or a sadhu. But to make that process easier, being open and honest reduces the risk of misinterpretations is a very, very key point. Misinterpretations happen due to a couple of things. As I mentioned before, assumptions about someone, but not getting the proper, you can say, fact recall by a greater person. Nonetheless, misinterpretations and confusions can happen due to we being in the state of Rajagun or Tamagun. Misinterpretations and confusions can happen due to someone else telling us, oh, this person is like this, but in honesty, that person was not like that. It was pictured like that. Things like that. But the best thing is to approach that person and confess or tell, and that would be the easiest. Maintains good reputation. Lack of transparency can have negative effects. Definitely true. If one is not transparent, what happens is that gap starts to grow more and more. And it starts to grow more and more, and even if that relationship that was built for a long time, it starts to become loose or crumble. But if transparency is kept, the negative effects will not affect. According to the Vachanamrut, Bhagwan Swaminarayan's words, Anandandan Swami asked, this is the Gadara, first chapter, 58th Vachanamrut, 58. Anandandan Swami asked further, how can a person please such a great Purush? Shriji Maharaj explained, first of all, he must be honest with the great Sant. As I mentioned already before, in the spiritual life, honesty is the most important, and the number one place to be honest is the Ekantik Satpurush 100%. Without that factor, it is very difficult for that mumukshu to progress in the path of spirituality. This is a hospital. Puja Guruji says, each and every person that comes here will have some kind of fault, dosh, whatever. That's not to look at, but more so, how much yearning, how much does he want to become pure? That's the most important. And Puja Guruji says, it's not about how pure you are, but it's all about how much you want moksha, how much you want ultimate liberation, how much you want to please Bhagwan and the Ekantik Satpurush. That's what they look at. If they looked at our dosh or vices, they're innumerable. You cannot count them, and they don't have that kind of time. But moreover, they're so compassionate that they do not want to look at that, but they want to be clear and they want us to progress. That's why they want us to be honest with them. As I mentioned, the vivek or discrimination of being honest, there are steps and levels. Ekantik Satpurush is 100% honesty. Then according to whatever relationship you have with a person, that's how you stay honest and open, and that's the way life is. And that's the way one can stay and remain happy wherever one is. Sadguru Shri Gunatitanand Swamini Vato. There may be trust, but one does not honestly confess. And if one is totally honest, then the Jiv cannot remain without becoming Brahmrup. This is a fact. So even honesty here, or transparency and honesty, we can also relate to one another. There may be trust, meaning trust in the Ekantik Satpurush, but one may not be honest with him because one is afraid that if I become honest, what will the Ekantik Satpurush think? Honest to God, the Satpurush wants you to become honest. He wants you to tell him what is hurting. Is it your head? Is it your stomach? Is it your feet? Is it your hands? What is it? So he can diagnose. Even if he knows, he wants you to diagnose, or he wants you to tell him. Why? Because he wants to see how much cup, he wants to see how much you want moksha. That's the most important. And off of that, he bestows his krupa. And from that mumukshu slowly but surely becomes purified, and his vices automatically become nullified, and he experiences shanti. He experiences peace. He experiences something that is not describable. But that only starts with these factors of trust and honesty. And that's when the Satpurush makes a procedure on him, surgery, and automatically due to that surgery, that Jiv becomes Brahmrup. That's the process the Ekantik Satpurush uses to make the Jiv from a fly to a sun. Considerations in transparency. Understand the limits of transparency. Share relevant information only. Very important. Information that needs to be passed. Not small stuff, not really that big of a deal, but information that needs to be passed to clarify, to strengthen a relationship is very important. Relevant information. Observe and evaluate a person before being open. Of course, this is something that our Puja Niskam Swami has taught us many times, that if you want to approach someone, first observe them, evaluate them, how they are, what feeling they are going through, and then approach them. Do not do so on an intensive manner or an aggressive manner, or when that person is not ready. Do it when everyone is at a very calm state and a peace of mind. That will have the most effect. And finally, transparency is a two-way street. Definitely, if one person is transparent, obviously the other person, or the person who became transparent, is also expecting the opposite person to do the same, and very clearly and very precisely and accurately to the point. Not 10%, 15%, but 100%. That is something that is needed. Conclusion. Transparency is important. Builds strong relationships, builds trust, leads to better decisions and solutions, makes life better, maintains good relationship, and keeps everyone happy. The most important factor in life is happiness. Everyone is looking for happiness, may it be in the world, if someone buying things and someone living the life of a worldly life. They want to be happy, but they don't know the source of happiness. Or may it be spirituality. Yes, God is the source of happiness, but in spirituality, if one does not be careful, then one can also fall from that and think that other sources in life can be or lead to happiness, which is not true. But the Ekantik Satpurush is the person that we should become transparent to for our personal matter, but for day-to-day life, clarity is important between and before everyone who you live with, because with that factor, everyone remains happy. So remaining happy is the main goal, and building strong relationships is the main goal. But transparency or clarity is needed in order to do so. May Bhagwan, may our Ekantik Satpurusho give us the strength to do so. Give us the strength to become Dasna Das like Muktanand Swami did, like our Puja Guruji is, like our Puja Santo are, because that's the only way that one can progress in the path of spirituality. Without that factor of Dasatva, it is very tough. And due to the lack of Dasatva, others also have to tolerate that. And it makes it hard for others to tolerate. Everyone has a capacity, and sometimes when that capacity breaks, that person is not able to share, because the opposite person, it's very hard for him to handle. But if one is transparent, it can definitely happen. May Maharaj and Guruji give us this kind of strength to do so. And may all of you in your worldly life, may it be relationships or may it be son-daughter, father-son relationships, have a transparent life in order to become successful and happy. May we pray to our Maharaj and our Sadguru Santo, saying this, my humble Jai Swaminarayan.